This is Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash, a podcast about everything that happens after Git Push. Ship It is brought to you by Fly.io, the home of changelog.com. Launch your apps close to your users all around the world. Learn how at Fly.io.
Okay, friends, I'm here with a good friend of mine, Shane Harder, the founder of Chronoder. Check them out at chronoder.io. Chronoder lets you keep tabs on your cron jobs, Linux, Kubernetes, Apache, Airflow, Sidekick, and more. With over 12 open source integrations, you can instrument all your jobs no matter where you're running them. So, Shane, one of the things I love most about Chronoder, I'm a user, as you know, is how great the UI is. It's very nice looking, it's easy to use, I can easily see all my jobs, it's easy to see all the details of my jobs, the timeline, the status, success rate, executions, and any alerts that I should pay attention to. How did you get to this user interface for Chronoder?
It's something we've been working on for years to get right, and it comes down to three key experiences in the app. And the first is just the overview of all your jobs and like what they're currently doing, what their recent execution history has been, and like what their overall state is. And then you can see that also on a timeline view. You know, like Chronoder was like the first one to do this, where instead of just having to look on a graph or a list, you know, jobs run on a timeline. You just put them on a timeline. So you can scroll back in time and see what happened like yesterday. You can also scroll forward in time and see like what your upcoming scheduled jobs are. And then when you drill down into like a single job, like what you're able to see in there is all the details that you need to understand what's going on and debug any issues that might be happening. So you've got the normal performance graphs and success rate graphs, and you can drill into stack traces and the complete log output from any job execution. And what makes these screens glanceable still is really disciplined use of color, where the whole app is in really sort of pleasant neutral tones, and we only let ourselves use like bold color on the areas where we really want to focus your attention. So if you see red or green on the UI, it's there intentionally and purposefully. And usually if you hit a screen, that's the first place your eye is going to go anyway. And we wanted to highlight that and make it easy to find and let you explore the rest of it and uncover the rest of it from there.
Okay, friends, join more than 50,000 developers using Chronoder. I'm one of them. You can start for free, and they have a pay-as-you-grow pricing plan. Setup is too easy with more than 20 SDKs. Check them out at chronoder.io. That's CRONITOR.io. Again, chronoder.io.
Hello and welcome to Ship It, the podcast all about what happens after you Git push. I'm your host, Justin Garrison, and on today's episode, we have an interview with David Flanagan. David is the founder and creator of Rawkode Academy. After successfully making a YouTube channel based on cloud native and Kubernetes stuff, exploring Kubernetes and how Kubernetes breaks, he's gone on to build his own platform for education. He's using things like GraphQL and Rust and WebAssembly all in production, running it himself. It was great diving into some of these details of why he chose those things, how he's running them, and what's unique about running it yourself versus using something like YouTube to distribute your content. It was fantastic hearing from David on how he's using these technologies, not only to build something himself, but why he decided that he needed to build something himself and how he's keeping it vendor agnostic. So let's jump into that interview with David, and we'll talk to you again after. Oh, and also thank you everyone who's been giving us feedback about the podcast. One thing we've heard loud and clear from people is making shorter intros. So we're trying that. And if you like it, please let us know. You can reach out to us at shipit@changelog.com as the email. We do read all the emails. And if you have someone else that you'd like to see on or hear on the podcast and another topic that you'd like us to discuss, please let us know. Send us an email. We love hearing from you. So let's jump over to the interview. All right, welcome to the show, David Flanagan, creator of Rawkode Academy. How's it going, David?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. We wanted to talk about what you're building with Rawkode Academy, why you decided to build it, and kind of how you maintain it. So just for background, what is Rawkode Academy?
So the background is the Rawkode Academy is a YouTube channel. That's it in its simplest form. I have a lot of fun exploring new technologies. I always call myself a technology magpie. And I figured other people might learn from me playing with these new technologies. So I started putting out videos that evolved into me sitting down with maintainers and walking through their project to get all of the flavor, history, context, and just share that with people while showing them how to do, hopefully, something interesting. But these days, it's a bit more than that because I'm taking control of my platform and saying no to big G, big Google. I built out a lot of software, a lot of programs, a lot of microservices, maybe a little bit too much, to bring it all in-house to a certain degree, where I control everything from first byte to, it's a lot, but it's very interesting. Hopefully interesting. We'll get into it.
I mean, that's a huge decision to go from a platform like YouTube of I create the video, I create the content, and they distributes, and you can run ads on it or do whatever. And like the kid dream right now, if everyone still wants to be a YouTuber, to being like, no, I don't want to be a YouTuber anymore. I want to make the software to own it.
It gets really challenging, right? Like YouTube is fantastic for a free distribution means, right? And I'm not saying that I won't still publish stuff to YouTube, but I need to be able to control. I mean, this is a business for me now. Let's give some context to the people that are listening or watching. In September 22, I was working at a company called Palumi, pretty happy with myself, enjoying life, and had a disagreement with leadership there. And 12 hours later, I was unemployed by my own volition. I left, just for the record. I didn't want to go back into just doing another DevRel gig and shilling a product. It was like, I just want to have fun kicking the tires on as much open source as I can and sharing that joy with people. So that's when the Rawkode Academy stopped being just a YouTube channel, and for me became my occupation, my business, my product, my service, like my everything. It was how I was going to pay my bills and support my family. And what I've realized since September 22, so we're now talking 2 years later, is that YouTube is fantastic and that it's free. But when it's free, you're the product, as we all know, right? But worse than that is that we've had over, I always say it's me, hi. We've had over 1 million views, and I cannot tell you a single useful thing about anyone who's watched any piece of my content over the last 5 years. Other than a high percentage of the audience is male. Thank you, YouTube. That's pretty much all I get. And I know roughly where the distribution is regards to the US, the UK, Europe, whatever. But that doesn't help me plan content. It doesn't help me prioritize new patterns, new themes, new technologies. I want to be able to build a conversation with people where we don't just fall flat at here's a tutorial on a thing, but it's okay. Like, what are you doing with it? How can we help? Where should we be pushing more buttons? Where should we be looking at something else? Should I be playing with WebAssembly? Should I be doing more eBPF? Like, I could just keep picking things that are cool, but I also want to be able to just engage and have a conversation and build a community and have more fun with this entire process. And to do that, I decided, well, I need to know more about the people that are watching my content. So about a year ago, I started building out my own platform. And I'll be completely honest right now. I made a huge faux pas this time last year where I went, you know what? Do I really need to build this, or can I just use Wix.com? And for 3 months, I had a Wix.com site that I lost sleep over every night. I was like, this is shit. What am I doing?
We've all been there.
Yeah, I had overnight, I had a blog, a store, I had my videos, and I was just like, this isn't the way. How can I be sitting playing with all this technology and not using my own journey as a means to build content, right? Like I think that's the good thing about the last year is I've played with so many technologies. I've learned a lot of valuable lessons on how not to do certain things, and I'm sure we can get into that. But there's good content just in me building something for real production rather than contrived situations that we do in documentation and on some live streams and etc. So it's been a very valuable year. I made some mistakes, but we're now in a position where we have a platform and an architecture that I have never seen before, which I'm excited. I'm doing some pretty weird stuff, but it's all in the name of exploration, pushing boundaries, and just finding some joy in what I'm building. So,
what is some weird stuff you're doing in the architecture?
Okay, so it is super microservice. I'll give you one example, right? So there's a profile microservice, and it's actually a meta microservice, in that it has no database, it has no columns, it has no fields. Instead, every single column in the profile service is a sub microservice itself. So if I want to say I want to start knowing people's age, I build a new microservice with one column that stores the user ID and their age, and we aggregate it in the meta service and publish it over GraphQL to the API. And I don't think I've seen anyone else use a columnar approach to microservices.
Now, the question is why? Why didn't you just use the database?
So, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know you've been doing it for a while too, but every major outage I've had, every complex, say, refactoring, tidy up comes down to databases, migrations, and data, right? Data evolves, it changes. You're never going to get the model right the first time. And I thought, why not plan for that now? And the great thing about this architecture is that if I decide I don't want to get people's age anymore, I delete the service. If I decide that I want to get, say I change the format and it's like, okay, I don't want to have their age as a ISO 8601 string of when they were born anymore, and I just want to capture the year, I can just create a new service, migrate the data, shut down the old one, and no downtime, no problems. The easiest flexible data structure that I'm ever going to have.
Why not just use a NoSQL database or something that's more of like a data lake, and then push it into like a NoSQL, so that way you can be kind of more... Because you could always blow up the database and start over from the data lake, or, you know what I mean?
I was a very early adopter of MongoDB as well, probably 2015, 2016, I think it was. And I loved the idea of not having a schema. But when you say you don't have a schema with these things, you do have a schema, you just don't control it.
Oh, you 100% do. Like, it's flexible, but like, didn't we just have someone the other week that like I had like a whole back and forth with, and he was like, it's schemaless. And I'm like, but it's not. That's not how any of this works. Like,
no, the schema is inferred, which means when you start to change data types, you end up in a position where you have all of these weird cross-boundary union types. And I think it causes more pain in the long run. It also makes it very difficult to do aggregations across that data, because you have to build in bailout clauses for when the data can't be aggregated, like a string data barf and an integer data barf. All these problems disappear with my architecture. Now, the challenge is that, okay, I've now got 14 different microservices that just describe what a user's profile looks like, and you have to push that all together. But fortunately, in 2024, we have some amazing projects out there that actually make this super easy. The one I'm using for this is called GraphBase. It's written in Rust. First time I've said Rust, not the last. And it's this wonderful architecture where I can define all the meta types, and it knows how to go and fetch all the joins for me. I don't actually do any of the hard lifting here. It's open source. It does it for me. Fantastic thing. They don't pay me any money. I wish they would, but
that's so cool.
People really need to go check out this project. Yeah, it's awesome.
I've never thought about, like, it's like a, you know how you have like those recipes that are like deconstructed egg rolls and stuff? It's like a deconstructed database. This is so cool.
I'm looking up this GraphBase.
GraphBase with an F, GARF base.
Oh, okay, there we go. I was like, there's one with like 3 stars on GitHub. Are you shipping that to? All right.
I'm not that early, no.
But the trade-off there is you're adding more ops overhead, right? Like you could do the data engineering side of things, and you have to do the schemas and transitions and all that other stuff. But in this case, you're like, I have 14 microservices that now you have to maintain and have uptime for and migrate and do that other stuff for, right?
Well, this is where anyone who's familiar with my work might be a bit pissed off at me, but none of this is deployed on containers or Kubernetes. It's all WebAssembly serverless. So developing locally is easy because I'm resolving a 1-column database query, which is fantastic. In production, because it's all deployed to Cloudflare workers, I'm not really worried about scale that much, because the free tier and then even paying for it, especially, I'm not talking about Google scale or anywhere near that. It's not millions of people hitting my site. So it's a very cost-effective way of doing it. And there's going to be people there yelling out, but what about the latency? Like, obviously, when you hit the meta endpoint and it's got to go consolidate or aggregate all these columns, we rely on some pretty heavy caching using GraphQL primitives that make this actually feasible, because people request their own profile once and it's cached for 6 hours, or unless they make a change. Because it's GraphQL, we have subscriptions, which means we can update that cache whenever things change. There's a lot of building on top of GraphQL here, which I know a lot of people are a fan of. Just hit and miss between REST and GraphQL.
It has gone through a moment of like, maybe this was a mistake, right? Like,
oh, I don't think so. Like when you build your API as a graph, and those graphs can be represented by services to the column level, and the RBAC as well is on fields and on types and on subgraphs. Like all of this becomes declarative in a GraphQL schema definition, which is otherwise really difficult to do in an open API definition. Not impossible, but definitely I would argue that it's not as easy to reason about as the GraphQL version of this. And to me, that's really exciting.
Being able to group your data like that is so interesting because you can group it in any way that you want with a GraphQL.
Yeah, so every microservice exposes the GraphQL endpoint, which is protected. The RBACs are applied on our read, write, or CRUD model, right? So basically, I say people can read their own data, they can create their own data, they can update their own data. Some fields are read to the world, like your profile is to a certain degree public, but your email address isn't, and all these things. And all of this is just annotations on columns within a database in the GraphQL schema. And then it just all works out the box. Again, building on the power of GraphBase. I have built very little that isn't my own services. I really am building on open source here. And I just can't believe all this stuff exists today. It's fantastic.
Okay, friends, I'm here in the breaks with Annie Sexton over at Fly. Annie, you know we use Fly here at Changelog. We love Fly. It is such an awesome platform, and we love building on it. But for those who don't know much about Fly, what's special about building on Fly?
Fly gives you a lot of flexibility, like a lot of flexibility on multiple fronts. And on top of that, you get... So I've talked a lot about the networking, and that's obviously one thing, but there's various data stores that we partner with that are really easy to use. Actually, one of my favorite partners is Tigris. I can't say enough good things about them when it comes to object storage. I never in my life thought I would have so many opinions about object storage, but I do now. Tigris is a partner of Fly, and it's S3 compatible object storage that basically seems like it's a CDN, but is not. It's basically object storage that's globally distributed without needing to actually set up a CDN at all. It's like automatically distributed around the world. And it's also incredibly easy to use and set up. Like creating a bucket is literally one command. So it's partners like that I think are this sort of extra icing on top of Fly that really makes it sort of the platform that has everything that you need.
So we use Tigris here at Changelog. Are they built on top of Fly? Is this one of those examples of being able to build on Fly?
Yeah, so Tigris is built on top of Fly's infrastructure, and that's what allows it to be globally distributed. I do have a video on this, but basically the way it works is whenever, like let's say a user uploads an asset to a particular bucket, well, that gets uploaded directly to the region closest to the user. Whereas with a CDN, there's sort of like a centralized place where assets need to get copied to, and then eventually they get sort of trickled out to all of the different global locations. Whereas with Tigris, the moment you upload something, it's available in that region instantly. And then it's eventually cached in all the other regions as well as it's requested. In fact, with Tigris, you don't even have to select which regions things are stored in. You just get these regions for free. And then on top of that, it is so much easier to work with. I feel like the way they manage permissions, the way they handle bucket creation, making things public or private is just so much simpler than other solutions. And the good news is that you don't actually need to change your code if you're already using S3. It's S3 compatible, so like whatever SDK you're using is probably just fine. And all you got to do is update the credentials. So it's super easy.
Very cool. Thanks, Annie. So Fly has everything you need. Over 3 million applications, including ours, here at Changelog. Multiple applications have launched on Fly. Boosted by global Anycast load balancing, zero configuration private networking, hardware isolation, instant WireGuard VPN connections, push button deployments that scale to thousands of instances. It's all there for you right now. Deploy your app in 5 minutes. Go to fly.io. Again, fly.io.
Did you find GraphBase and then decided GraphQL was the way to go because it did that? Or were you looking at GraphQL as the API first, and then you're like, I need to find something that is written in Rust and works with WebAssembly?
Yeah, so GraphBase is an interesting company. They're still pre-Series A. They're seed right now. They actually launched 2 years ago, and I looked at it at the time, but I was still in full-time employment, so I was like, I'm not building anything. I stuck a star on it in GitHub like you do, and then forget about it. And then when I started saying, okay, Wix was a terrible idea, what am I going to do? I've always been a big fan of GraphQL, and I thought, okay, how would I build this as a GraphQL first thing? And try to, again, cheat. I always try to take like the easy path. I don't want to build something myself unless I really, really have to.
That's not easy. That's smart. Like, you're not reinventing the wheel.
That's experience from someone that's been on call, right? You're like, I've carried this pager before. I'm not going to build it if I don't have to.
Let's not downplay the fact that you're smart, okay? Like, because it's always that dude who's like, I'm just going to build my own. And you're like, okay.
Well, I try my best to not go down that path. So I was using Neon database, which is like a serverless Postgres thing, open source, really cool, written in Rust, obviously. They support a plugin, a Postgres plugin called PG GraphQL, which essentially just takes your GraphQL, your Postgres data, and exposes it over GraphQL.
Yeah.
Ran into challenges with that just because I didn't think the RBAC model was strong enough, and then leaned into Superbase, another open source project which does manage Postgres. They actually are the authors of PG GraphQL, but they augment it with row and column based security policies on Postgres. I went down that route for a while, and then I found myself writing an awful lot of SQL. Like every time I added a new service, a new table, a new column, I had to then write the row level security policy, the column level security policy, usually required custom Postgres PLSQL functions. And I was like, I don't want to be a PLSQL developer. Like, this is not where I need to be. And at the same time, there was a lot of buzz happening on, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, around SQLite, libSQL, and Terzo, which is like the replicated version of SQLite for production use cases. Very, very cool project written in Rust. I mean, how many times am I going to say that? It's getting ridiculous. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. But the challenge with doing it with libSQL over Postgres is that GraphBase don't have a native integration for libSQL. So I had to then hook into the TypeScript ecosystem, find an ORM that supports Cloudflare Workers, which was Drizzle, write a couple of queries, but everything is modeled as code now rather than PLSQL or SQL SQL. So I'm in a much better position. And I just started going down that path, going, okay, if I write a service that can speak to my SQL database, how do I expose that to the end user? Because that's something that Superbase and Neon did for me with this extension, and I've lost that. And that's when I can't even remember if it popped in my head or I went to one of my hacks when I'm looking for is github.com/topics, and I just add the phrase, and I put in GraphQL, GraphBase popped back up, and I said, I looked at this. And then I started speaking to the founder, and then I had a proof of concept within a couple of days, and I just started rolling with it from that point forward.
So I think Postgres is really great for a lot of things when like you need something that's kind of more flexible, but you don't want to go all the way to NoSQL, So it's like very, Postgres runs the world. It's crazy how many things it's underneath. But at the same time, like it is still SQL and still very structured,
It requires a lot of operational needs as well, right?
It does.
Like Postgres, I would have to either pay Superbase or Neon to manage that for me. And while I'm using Terzo, if I wanted to go SQLite or libSQL myself, that's relatively easy to do. And it also opens up new architectures that, again, probably aren't possible with Postgres, to the point where if I find that I'm paying too much on infrastructure and I can ship a SQLite file over HTTP to your local storage in your browser and never make an API request. And that kind of architecture to me is interesting, even to the degree where I could have a SQLite database for every user that is complete isolated, that has their view and preferences and history that I never even have to know about. That can live. It can live in their Google Drive if they wanted to connect that up. It could live in R2 storage, S3, or it could live in their local cache and disappear when they log out. Like all these things become a possibility just by using SQLite because it has so much flexibility.
Now, you're using Rust, you're using WebAssembly, you're in Cloudflare Workers. Why not the key value store they have for workers?
Because while I'm deploying to Cloudflare Workers, everything I'm doing, I could, if I wanted to, spin up some Equinix Metal, throw it on a beefy box, and run my own WebAssembly runtime. I don't want to be tied into any one particular platform. So I'm not baking in any managed services from Cloudflare whatsoever. As appealing as it is to hook into PubSub or D1 and all that, or even their image service, there's just other ways to do it that are completely agnostic, can run anywhere. And I haven't found a need. There's never been a situation where I thought, you know what, I really should just use this, because in open source, we just have so many options these days. Yeah, really cool.
What made you not pick like a NoSQL database like Cassandra or like one of those, just because you wanted the flexibility?
Because I have operated Cassandra before.
I mean, it's horrible. Don't get me wrong. Like, but I just but like there are other options. Like, because you know what I mean. Like, you're still going to end up having to manage all those different microservices. Like, so you're really just picking your different poison. But yours do seem like it's going to be like better. But there are a lot of like people have been running Cassandra for so long that there are ways to automate it and all that good stuff. So like, before you got deep into it, what made you think like, okay, instead of using this thing that like is open source but tried and true, I'm going to go build my own microservices? Like,
yeah, I think this just comes down to experience. You know, I have been Kubernetes container SRE for the last 10 years and a developer for 10 years prior. So, you know, I've had the pager for Kubernetes clusters, for Docker clusters, for Cassandra clusters. I don't want that ever again. I like getting sleep at night. So I'm not going to trade that for anything. But the SQLite over anything else, it doesn't matter what the technology is, whether it's Postgres, where it's Apache Arrow hooking up to Data Fusion, which is then written to MySQL, or Cassandra, or MongoDB, CouchDB, all great technologies. But at the end of the day, if I really want to, can someone come to my website and never speak to a database by using a local file, a SQLite file? Yes. And that to me is something I can do in the future. Is very interesting and a promising approach. And then there's the local dev experience. Again, I've been in this container field for a while, and I'm sure you've all worked with projects that have got Docker Compose, Docker files. The experience is not great, especially when you start layering in services. I remember writing the automation to try and make it possible for open source people to build on the Supabase version of what I was building, and trying to set up something that worked relatively well with Supabase running in a container locally that didn't revolve spinning code into a Docker for Mac instance with a virtual machine that was performant was too complicated. It was too painful. I didn't like it.
This is how we know you've done it a lot, because people are always like, I'm going to get this super fancy database. And I'm just like, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could shove half of this in like an S3, as long as it's like a non-dynamic like website, and save a bunch of money. You know what I mean? And it's like, people always want to do stuff with the fanciest thing. And I love that you're like, I can go back to a SQLite file. And I'm like, this dude's done things. Because when you're like a solutions architect and people ask you for like all this information, you tell them the simplest, cheapest thing, and they just look at you like you have 6 heads. Like, like, how could you recommend that? Like,
yeah, I think there's definitely a case of, we've all seen stuff. We don't want to repeat mistakes of the past. But also, like, I've also worked at a lot of companies that had big data that were throwing them into data lakes and, you know, onto whatever managed service, whether that be, I can't remember what Google's is called. I can't remember what Amazon's or Google's is called. BigQuery, and then there's the Redshift. Amazon one. Redshift.
Snowflake.
Yeah, right. So I've helped companies put their big data into this and then realize that they're looking at doing one query every 6 minutes over 1,000 rows. And you're like, why are we doing this? Like, it's absolute overkill.
Look, S3 is the most underrated data lake ever. Okay.
Especially with the Apache Arrow and Parquet projects. Parquet, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Those are making data architectures wildly different as well today. And I would love to say that I was using that as well with like distributed blob storage, but I've not had a need yet.
Yeah, you don't need to.
And again, when it comes to the Rawkode Academy, well, I'm building something that's genuinely interesting to me. I'm not talking about 10 million users. I'm not talking about 10,000 videos. I'm talking about 500 videos, 400 hours of content, and tens of thousands of people hitting the site. So,
because we definitely know those people who like, they've definitely outgrown the simple architecture and they're holding on for dear life. And you're like, dude, like, so that's definitely like, your use case is really fitting for that.
Plus, I don't have to worry about license changes with SQLite, right? So, you know, Cockroach DB, I'd be screwed right now.
Well, not just that, but look at how many like license changes have affected, like with Redis and like a bunch of places, and now they have to like with so many things built on top of those, now they have to reconsider like whole startups, you know?
Yeah, and depending on when people listen to this, Elasticsearch just flip-flopped and went open source
they went
again
back.
yesterday.
Oh,
So,
really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
yeah,
crazy.
They went back to... Yeah.
It just seems like it's been like the year or two of like open source rug pulls. So I wonder if it's also making people reconsider how they build things, you know, because you don't know what your license is going to be 2 years down the road after you've already been dependent on this software. How do you account for scale now that you've built all these microservices that you are going to have to maintain? Like, do you feel like it's going to get harder if, let's say, you get like, I don't know, 10 million users, or the more videos
After this podcast, when you have a million users, what's the...
I'm not terribly worried about scale, because I feel like it's been architected in a way where all of the services are like, I mean, we're talking a column per service. There's no maintenance required there. Well, what am I going to change? Like, oh, I decided that I don't want the date of birth column to be called date of birth anymore. I'm going to change it to DOB. Like, when you do it, all I'm doing is killing services or writing new ones. There's no maintenance really to be done. Now, we do have the aggregation layer. So, you know, there is GraphBase that is sitting there and orchestrating all of my subgraphs. That requires a little bit of work. But again, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants there. They're doing this work. They're building this project that's being used by, you know, I assume large companies that are giving them money and supporting the project. And I'm just riding on the coattails. I'm just been like, hey, I want to use this. This is cool. And it's working out really well so far. So,
does WebAssembly live up to the kind of no ops hype versus maintaining microservices in a container full-time running sense versus it's a function that runs on top of a runtime that when you push new code to it, it deploys across all wherever your runtime is, Cloud for Workers, wherever it's at. Does that actually live up to the, you don't maintain that? It's just, it's basically code you wrote and it just goes somewhere?
Yeah. So there, I'm assuming you want more detail, but
no, that's a great answer. Yeah. Because that, like lowering the operational overhead of a new microservice, like obviously, like usually microservices are really bad because either they add a lot of latency and things that you don't expect on something that's distributed, or they add a lot of ops overhead because you're like, oh, I have to coordinate this push microservice with that push microservice with this release with that other thing. And that organization problem of just like, they all have to go at the same time. It's not a microservice anymore, right? Like it's a distributed monolith and you just made it harder for yourself.
Okay, so there's a few things there, even beyond WebAssembly, so I'm going to try and touch on all of that. The first thing about microservices, they solve two major problems for me that containers have. We've had this problem with containers for all 10 years of containers' existence, at least in their current form. One of them is a cold start problem. If you put a function into a container has a whole bunch of prerequisites before it can even run your function, which is it needs a sandbox, it needs an IP address, it needs networking setup, it needs a Linux processes, user namespaces, all this stuff has to exist before your function runs. The cost of that could be as low as 50 milliseconds, but could be as bad as half a second, 500 milliseconds. And that's assuming
Java.
You've got the container image already pushed. Let's not talk about Java. So that seems okay at low scale. It's like, okay, half a second, that's fine. But when you've got
Autumn just shaking her head. I'm sorry.
Dying. First we started off talking about Macs like this, and then Java and NoSQL. Why are you trying to hurt me?
Keep going.
Oh yeah. So the problem, like WebAssembly solves that problem. And like when we talk about the invocation of a WebAssembly module, I am measuring that in nanoseconds, not milliseconds, not microseconds, nanoseconds. Because we don't need a sandbox. We don't need Linux namespaces. We don't need an IP address. None of that stuff exists or even matters.
Well, you offloaded that to the runtime, right? Like that's just someone else's problem. The runtime run once, and everything else underneath that is just like a process fork. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. You know, to the point where I gave a talk at a conference in Paris. It was the JavaScript.js conference. And I was trying to make sure people understood how much a nanosecond versus millisecond difference is. And I was like, and the same time that it takes for 1 millisecond to execute a WebAssembly function, if we map that to a millisecond, you could watch The Matrix. And I think it was like 1,700 times in relation to that nanosecond invocation. Like that's how drastic these numbers are, right? And I don't think people really realize that. So when we talk about performance of WebAssembly, from a startup perspective is ridiculous. And then even just having the small few meg for each binary versus a container image is also another huge selling point. So that's great. Now, because we don't need the container, that also has drastic improvements to the developer experience on your local machine. Now, I'm assuming, I know Justin's not, but Autumn, you may be running a Mac. Other people listening may be running a Mac. Linux containers aren't native there. I don't know if people knew this, right? And that's fine for like compiled binaries like Go and Rust, like where it's just going to suck anyway and it doesn't really matter. But dynamic languages and like PHP and Ruby have runtimes and they have an interpreter instead of a compiler. This requires syncing your entire file system with your application, which is with its dependencies, like a JavaScript application, tens of thousands of files in a node modules folder, into a virtual machine and then doing some sort of execution. So you don't get that refresh, like Control R the page and the new things there. You're going to wait 3 seconds and then eventually it may work, or worse, right? 10 seconds. Now, Docker are trying to make this better. They've actually bought a startup in the last 12 months. That's a really cool syncing technology to improve this. But with WebAssembly, it just goes away because the sandbox runs natively on Mac, Linux, BSD, doesn't really care where it runs. We don't have a container. We don't have a virtual machine. It just has a sandbox. It disregards POSIX completely. So you get a great local developer experience. You just write code in your local machine and you run it with this nanosecond invocation performance. Like, who doesn't want that? Like, stick a SQLite file in your host as well and you're good. Screw the Postgres script. So, like, from a DX perspective, I think it's unrivaled and it's not something we've had in a very long time. And we still get the same benefits to the regards of, because it's not based on POSIX and Linux file systems and you don't need to install weird kernel modules and all this stuff. We don't even need the container aspects for repeatability because if the code compiles to that binary, you can literally run it anywhere. They're like the promise of the JVM and the Java bytecode. Although I think Graal's getting us a little bit closer there now, but I don't know if we want to get into a religious Java war during this session. So.
How much time we have to stay on topic, right? Your hard drive's going to fill up if we go more than...
We only have 1,387 hours left, so...
Not enough time for a Java war. And that makes sense to me. Why, and maybe this is just because you love it, why Rust? Like, you can compile WebAssembly from a lot of different languages. Why did you go with Rust?
So I do genuinely believe that Rust just has the best support right now, and it's not a surprise because Rust and WebAssembly all came out of Mozilla around the same time. There was a lot of co-conspirators there trying to build a new rendering engine for Firefox with Rust and with WebAssembly. So even though Mozilla had those layoffs and probably set WebAssembly back a substantial amount, I think that was 2021, whatever. We're now in a position now where it's been picked up by enough companies because of that performance characteristics. And when we talk about the performance characteristics, we're talking about CDNs at the edge where they want to run WebAssembly as fast as possible. Like, Akamai are a big sponsor now of the spec. Cloudflare are involved with WebAssembly. I'm sure AWS have got some fingers in that as well. So there's a lot more support, a lot more structure, and WebAssembly is just coming forward. And Rust has been there every step of the way to the point where Rust was built. It's like Go, right? It was like multi-target by default. It can compile to any target as long as you have the right toolchain involved to do that. And WebAssembly was a very early target for Rust. It's also just a great language. When you get into the science behind it, not that I'm great with the scientific part, but the type system, the memory safety, is just a joy to work with. And having done a lot of Go in the past, and I like Go as a language, dependency management has been rocky over the last 10 years, and Rust...
I'm not a fan of Go because of the dependency management and ecosystem. Like, I don't enjoy writing Go. I love Cargo, but I don't like writing Rust. And so I have this trade-off of like, and that's mostly because I haven't just done enough with Rust. But yeah, like I was like, when I picked up Cargo, I'm like, oh, this is how I wish Go was. Like, I wish this dependency management worked in a different language.
Yeah, with Go, you're like, I need something that can do a DAG. All right, how do I find that package? Oh, well, I'm going to Google it, or I'm going to go on a mailing list, or I'll go on to the GitHub and just search and hope I find the right package. NPM, Cargo, PyPy, these all have central repositories where you just go and search for the thing you're looking for and you find them, which is just like tick number one. But then Cargo just has a really strong CLI that makes pulling in these dependencies, updating these dependencies, feature toggles per dependency, overrides on a crate level basis. Like, everything that you need to do exists in one tool and you don't have to really venture out of that too much. As well as just Rust. Again, I like the language. I like the mix of functional but not full OO. It works really well for me. So Anytime I see Rust, I usually go for that before any other language. Although I still have a soft place in my heart for Go, a little bit.
I feel like Rust has done open source the right way. Like they've done a lot of building like their foundation and their documentation and making it like is usable. And then with all the memory safety and stuff, like if you're going to pick a new language to like learn, you know, like if it's between Rust and Go or Rust and a lot of things, you might as well just do the work to like learn Rust because there's so many positives that you're going to get from it.
Yeah, I think there's, if you take a look at Rust, it's not doing this alone, right? Elixir is another great example of a modern language that has been built on developer experience, giving people good error messages in the compiler.
Oh, yes.
Like, why is that so hard for some languages to do?
That is Rust, the most frustrating thing ever. Like, okay, I get it. You're mad at me, but can you tell me why, please?
Like, missing semicolon on line 100. I'm like, it's a 4-line file.
Like, but why?
Yeah, these languages get it right. The error messages usually point you to the line. They tell you what's wrong, and sometimes they'll even tell you how to fix it. And that's just not something. Nobody has invested that much effort into compilers or interpreters than I would believe Elixir and Rust has in the last decade. So
that alone would just make me learn a language. Like I might go learn Rust now. What advice do you have for other people in DevRel that are kind of pivoting in a way? Because I think, as someone who looked at getting into DevRel, a lot of right now, I think it's like the industry is kind of going through a lot, and it's like sell your soul and like hawk this horrible AI product that nobody wants to use, or go start your own thing. Like, do you have like any like encouragement for the fact that you started your own thing and you're doing well at it, or do you have any advice on like for other people in DevRel? Because it's like, it seems like you're kind of living the dream right now. You're getting to actually build cool things and experiment and not have to sell your soul for it. So like,
I mean, I've sold my soul a few times over now, but yeah, I'm in a good place. DevRel's things are tough right now. I mean, I've got a lot of friends that have lost their jobs. The entire tech market is in a major phase of cutbacks, but DevRel's not going anywhere. Like, I think we can all agree, developers, we smell marketing bullshit a mile away. And the problem was all these companies hired DevRels to be marketers and not to do proper developer advocacy and relations. And then they put out marketing style content, developers smelt the bullshit, and now they're all like, oh, we're not getting the results we expected. Like, no shit. Like, you can't just take the same thing you've been doing for the last 20 years, call it DevRel, and then expect to have a massive upturn in your business. And there's also the challenge that a lot of people are looking at, like the Linux Foundation and the Cloud Native Foundation, as free marketing, donating their projects. And that's causing a lot of hassle too, because these projects think, oh, we're now incubating CNCF project. We're going to get all of these contributors. People are going to fix all their bugs and we're going to get all this adoption. But you're still just one project in a sea of many, and an evolving landscape with developers that are frustrated trying to keep up with this race that they didn't sign up for. No, it's not going to work. So I think we're going to see a lot of change over the next 2 to 5 years. Developer advocacy and relations is going to be stronger than ever, with the right people, with authentic, credible messaging, with companies that get it. And everyone else will go back to doing what they were doing before. Dodgy mailing lists, dodgy advertising, and yeah.
All the same companies that change their sysadmin titles to SREs. And they're like, why isn't reliability better? They're like, what do you do? It's the same folks doing the same thing. Like, you didn't just change it because they're SRE now. Yeah, it's
that's just because they wanted to pay DevOps engineers less money and then pay it. That's like when they did business intelligence first, data sciences, and then like, just why are you like this? Like, I really hope you're right, because I feel like that's the dream, to be able to get the job where you get to experiment and really tell people like what using a product is like. And it's just, the market is rough, dude. Like, people just seem so down, and it just seems like is rough out here. So
and I mean, a lot of the early like DevRel was just, they found someone in the community that was excited about their product and like, hey, why don't you just do what you're doing now and just work for us? And then tell them, like, that seemed like the cycle for a long time, and that didn't scale very well. And a lot of times it was, like you said, they like, well, we need a marketing arm, but we're going to call it DevRel and have some developer do our marketing stuff and manage the Google clicks and stuff. Like, no, wait, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, like going back to my early career, before I was my title was DevRel. I was an engineer doing DevRel anyway, and I think that was when it was at its most authentic. When you have people that are building something, but they're also good at showing people what they're building and why they're building it and telling that story. That narrative, when it's authentic, is invaluable, is gold dust. But when we get to the stage where every startup in Silicon Valley is hiring 10 people DevRel team and they've got 20 engineers, like, it doesn't really make any sense at that point. They're overloading the marketing arm completely. They're telling the same messages. They're getting diluted. They don't make sense anymore. The demos get contrived and it all falls apart. And I've seen this with many organizations.
Not just that, but they're forcing people to sell things they don't believe in. A lot of people were hired for one job, and now they're like, now you sell this product and you need to like be happy about it. Like, you know, like nobody's going to do a good job doing that. Like,
I had one friend that was at many startups and all three of them got bought by VMware, and he was like, for he's like rolling in his money, of course, because there's three acquisitions, but he's like, how do I keep ending up in VMware? And he's like, I can't do this. So yeah, I mean, it's a challenge in DevRel, but I do think it's going to come out better. And I think the people that stick with it, that really do just enjoy playing with technology and keep their messaging authentic and credible and have fun with it, those will be the people that succeed, that do well. And
I 100% believe that like when someone sees someone else having fun, you want to know why. And you're just like, if you're having authentic fun on the internet, people start coming and they're just like, hey, what are you doing over there? Like, oh, this is amazing. Right. And just like, let me show you what we do. It's just like, I see my son like out there, he sees some friends playing. He's like, I want to go play with them. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know, but I want in. Right. And you're just like, I was maybe, you know, in 5 minutes later, like, oh, okay, it wasn't for me, whatever. What's next for Rawkode Academy? What's the next fun thing? What's the next architecture design? What else are you building that you're like, this is missing still?
So my next major task is, obviously I've said that I'm saying goodbye to YouTube being where content goes first. So I've been building out my own streaming platform where we do the encoding and drop it into Cloudflare R2 buckets. Now I've got an initial concept where I use Cloudflare Stream, but I'm very much trying not to be baked into any service. So I started doing some investigation to how videos work on the internet. And I was absolutely shocked to find how simple it is. So all you need to do is send your data over an RTMP. Send your data over RTMP to an endpoint, which does audio transcoding and video transcoding. And then all it does is write the same byte buffer size to a single file and object storage, and that's what gets read by all the clients. You just write over that same file every second, every 30 seconds, every 30 times every second, whatever you want, depends on your bit rate, your frame rate, and all that. But that's all you have to do. And that's actually not that hard. There's a lot of really good pre-existing software out there that could do this. It will be the first time in this new architecture where I'm going to have to spin up I'm going to have to use some of my Equinix Metal credits, get a beefy box, run some containers with Kubernetes, hopefully on Talos, and do that encoding, because I'm not going to be able to offload that to a serverless platform. I don't want to buy in to Amazon's video encoder, Cloudflare's video encoder. So I'm going to do it myself, and I'm very excited. But when I found out all you need to do is take the bytes, do the processing, and write to one file and like object store, is that I can do that. So that's my next mission, is to build out my own streaming pipeline. And then I'll still be storing all the videos in their full form in Cloudflare R2. That's how we deliver everything to the website right now that's not HTML. No zero egress fees. It's fantastic. Thank you, Cloudflare.
The way the internet's intended to be.
Yeah, and something I've been experimenting with in my spare time is how can I build my own Riverside StreamYard thing. So I've been kicking the tires on WebRTC and seeing if I can actually build my own local first StreamYard Riverside thing. And again, that isn't even that hard either. Once you get the WebRTC feeds coming to a single location, you're pretty much just baking them into HTML canvases and then spreading them out on the page with HTML. And that, I couldn't believe how simple. No, again, I'm saying simple. These things are complex, but with modern open source and tooling and all that, they are almost trivial to implement. Like, I'm not doing the heavy lifting here. So I'm very excited to kind of take complete control of that. And everything I'm doing is open source on GitHub as well. So it's not all open source right now because we're still finalizing bits and pieces, but it's going to be there pretty soon. And a lot of it already is there, especially a lot of the graph-based GraphQL stuff is already on GitHub. So
the way you say, like, this is going to be so simple, I'm both scared, but I have faith in you. But like,
I mean, encoding video is not simple. OCR is not simple. AI is not simple. But in 2024, we have simple APIs that we can use to do all of this stuff. I can run Ollama locally. I can use Gemini from Google. I can use OpenAI. If I want to do video transcoding, there's amazing Python projects out there that do all of that for me. I actually sat down and in less than half an hour, like 4 weeks ago, was able to write a Python script that I can't remember what the Python library is called, but all it does is like OCR. It took every single frame from every one of my previous videos, ran it through the OCR and did command extraction. And what I got was a CSV data set of the video, the timestamp, and the command that was run. And to me, that's invaluable because now I can enrich all of my content with, here's all the commands as they're being run, copy and paste it. Yeah. And that's another thing why I'm building this whole video layer too. Is like, imagine watching the tutorial and there's a sidebar with the commands you copy and paste, links to the documentation. All of this can be done via good OCR, voice detection, transcription, and now you get to truly augment the video experience for the viewer. I can't do that with YouTube. I can only do that by building it myself.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Also, I did not know that there wasn't better analytics for YouTube. It's kind of shocking the amount of users on that platform and like the acquisitions, and nobody was like, let's give people more data about their audience so they can do better.
They give people the data that they can under certain data regulations. Like, they can't tell me the name of everyone that watches it, right? That's just never going to happen. However, if I control the pipeline and they're logged in, I know who they are. I know what technology. Like, if you watch 20 videos on my website, I might know that you're interested in Rust, WebAssembly, Python, whatever. That data becomes useful for me. One, I get to prioritize the content that I'm making and do more of the stuff that people are enjoying. But also from working with my partners, they might be interested to know that 70% of the people in the last 2 weeks have been Googling Python or whatever. Like, there's a very good uses of that anonymized data that doesn't impeach anyone's rights. And I want to explore that in an ethical way. And everything that I do, like all of my dashboards, my plan is to make them all public too. You'll actually be able to come on to like dashboard.rawkode.academy and see anonymized how many people are searching for Python, how many people are searching for this, and build up this really cool, unique data source of developers that want to continue their career and learn new technologies. At least my little bubble of it, right? I'm not Stack Overflow, but
But I love that you're utilizing open source, but you're also giving a lot back, and you're also like telling people about it. Like, like if you're going to use something that other people built, the way that you're telling other people like, hey, this cool thing, go check this out instead of this, and this, you know what I mean? And just kind of, if you can't give them money, you're still giving them more customers, you know what I mean? And you're still helping maintain it. So I think that's cool that it's like good stewardness of open source in those technologies.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not building any of the hard stuff myself. That's why everything I do is open source, because I don't feel there's anything. I think the architecture is unique. I think the spin on stuff that I do is unique, but the code is not unique, right? It's the simplest, easiest code in the world. So like insert into a SQLite database, read from a SQLite database. However, the way we compose it and put it together, that what I think is interesting. I want to be able to share that with people as well.
But that's awesome, because some people will still take open source code and then charge people and use it. But also the way that you're building in public, you're going to give somebody else confidence to go and string some open source together and build something. And, like that being a developer is now accessible, like you can go and learn that like being able to learn it and string things together and build something and to see how someone else is going through those problems is like how people get good at this stuff. So
yeah, couldn't agree more.
David, thanks so much for coming on the show. We almost made it through a whole episode without mentioning AI, but that's okay. It's in
Justin,
there.
It's never going to happen. It's just never going to happen.
But it's fine. We'll make it someday. But this is a great, almost like a side quest of WebAssembly that I didn't really expect. So if people want to find you, I'm sure you're at Rawkode Academy. Anywhere else they should reach out?
I mean, on socials, I'm at Rawkode or Rawkode Academy. The website is Rawkode Academy. And of course, check out the YouTube. Like I said, there's 400 hours now of cloud native Kubernetes and container based Rust content for people to enjoy. So I hope they get value out of it.
Soon to be WebAssembly.
And a ton of WebAssembly for sure.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. My pleasure.
What's up, friends? I'm here in the breaks with my good friend, my new friend, Kyle Spearin, the creator of Bitwarden, the open source password manager you know and love. And now they have secrets management for businesses, for developers, for you, for your infrastructure, for all the things. So Kyle, I know that Bitwarden has deep roots. Take me to the beginning. How did you begin this thing?
The early stages of Bitwarden came from me wanting to create something that was really easy to use so that lots of people could adopt it and use it, but also appeal to people who are like-minded like myself, who really like the open source message and the benefits of open source technology and what that brings to the market. Fast forward several years of kind of doing that, there was a lot of untapped potential too in the product. But there's a lot of things I don't, have strengths in, and where I thought I could bring in outside help to help me. And I helped develop that over the course of several years of running the product and build those right relationships with the right people. And then once I was ready to kind of accept that help, I brought people in and we really took the business to the next level of where it could be. And now we have, millions and millions and millions of users using our product today. And we have multiple products that we really service the kind of security industry with.
Okay, so now you've scaled, you've got millions and millions and millions of users deep into password management, and you've scaled the team, you've scaled the product, you've scaled the company, and now you have secrets management for teams, for infrastructure, for all the things. What are some of the key concerns that made you go this direction?
There's a sprawl of secrets for, think about how large your environment is and all the things and all the endpoints and machines you have to manage to kind of orchestrate and make this whole thing work, right? Like there are tools that help you do all that, but all those tools are using secrets in different ways, right? You end up with this sprawl of secrets that are everywhere, much like the sprawl of secrets you have in password management of all the services you use on the internet. It's kind of overwhelming. Like I think a lot of people, if you would ask how many different passwords or secrets that you have that you kind of use across the internet, if I had to bet, almost all of them would underestimate the value that they actually are. And once you understand the depth of the sprawl you have, it's a challenge to figure out how you're going to do that and what tool you're going to find to kind of manage that. In addition to the sprawl, there's also the sprawl of your organization itself, the human element of it as well, which, at every company, there are people who come and there are people who go, and there are people who need access to certain secrets and there are people who don't need access to other secrets. And that's also a very challenging problem to solve. Part of the core feature set of what Bitwarden Secrets Manager is solving are those two problems. How do you manage from a single pane of glass all the secrets you need to use throughout your environments and infrastructure? And then how do you control who has access to those secrets in a kind of least privilege access way that creates the best security practices that you need to secure your organization?
Okay, get streamlined secrets management for developers at bitwarden.com/secrets. Get end-to-end encrypted Bitwarden Secrets Manager. Secure your infrastructure, your machine secrets, and your developer secrets. Start a free 7-day Bitwarden Secrets Manager trial today at bitwarden.com/secrets. That's bitwarden.com/secrets.
Thank you so much, David, for coming on the show and talking to us all about Rawkode Academy. And thank you, David, for sticking around for the outro. This is just going to become a thing now. It's kind of fun. Our guests this isn't an outro anymore. This is just the tail end of the podcast. And I know for this episode, you're going to quiz me on some Kubernetes things. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll see if you're still thanking me for sticking around and finding out.
Finally, somebody who speaks the Kubernetes to actually test Justin.
I am very scared. If no one has seen David's series of Clustered on YouTube, you should go watch it. I participated once as a breaker, but never as a fixer. But there's a lot of weird things that can break and happen. And you have a quiz for me, and I just am trying to delay as long as I can, so I don't have to take this quiz.
I promise there is nothing here that is clustered bad. These are relatively reasonable questions from easy difficulty to the Rawkode difficulty level.
Oh, okay. And I'm just worried that most of my experience is probably, it's going to show that I have so much more experience in EKS and bare metal, and there's a lot of gaps in between of different things that people do. So we're going to try.
So I shouldn't ask you any questions on the eBPF signatures of kernel modules.
Please no.
See, y'all are missing it because you can't see our faces, and usually Justin and me have great faces, but David's faces are fire. Y'all he's got the cool Scottish accent and the faces.
And the dry Scottish humor, which is just sarcasm.
It's the best humor. What do you mean?
All right.
Well, we start with the easy question.
Sure. And end with the easy question as well. Just keep going through.
We'll see how it goes. Right. We'll keep this nice and simple. I know you're going to get this one, but we'll start with which Kubernetes object is responsible for ensuring a specified number of pods are running at any given time? And it's multiple choice, or you may not need it for this one. So
I don't need it for that one, but if anyone's driving in their car listening to this podcast right now, just be careful, watch the road still, don't swerve. Or anything. But that would be a replica set. I'm assuming it's not a stateful set, which actually I guess stateful sets are replica sets under the hood, aren't they? No, because they're numbered.
Yeah, they're a special type, yeah.
Yeah, it's a special type. But yeah, replica set would ensure that a certain number of pods. I was just messing with KubeVirt this last week. Which has like VM pools and how to run VMs inside. It is difficult.
It is. Yeah. Anyway, you got that correct. You didn't say deployment,
yes.
Which means you understand the hierarchy of Kubernetes controllers. So tick.
Yes.
All right. Next up, we have, what is the purpose of a Kubernetes liveness probe?
That is the part of the startup process to check that a service is alive and respond. It's not ready yet, but it is responding. I'm trying to think if there's more specific detail on.
There's one characteristic that this is something that trips people up: readiness probes and liveness probes, and then the startup probes. There's 3 different probes on a Kubernetes workload, but specifically a liveness probe.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of because the startup probe is just that the process is running or just the very basics of it, but I'm assuming liveness probe is that it's not always an endpoint though, because it can be a shell. I don't know. I can't think of a specific detail of a liveness probe.
Yeah, the liveness probe is probably the simplest of them all, and it just checks that you get HTTP 200 for an HTTP check, or you can do TCP checks, etc. Basically, what makes them different? Okay, I don't want to get into like a 14-minute rant on how probes work in Kubernetes, but you use the readiness probe to determine whether a pod endpoint should be part of a service or not, and a liveness probe is whether, if it fails, the pod has to be restarted.
Yeah. Okay. And that's usually for like if you want to like start up a cache, right? Because the cache might need to warm up. You don't want it in the service until the cache is ready, and so it's alive, but it's doing something before it's actually ready to serve traffic. Is that right? But can you do shell commands for liveness probes too?
Yeah. You can do exec or HTTP. I think those are the 2 main ones. All right, let's see. Obviously, we only decided to do this moments ago, and we threw a bunch of stuff into AI and had it give me a whole ton of questions, and I had to very quickly filter them. So that's why we're kind of I'm seeing them at the same time as you. Okay.
But you see the answer.
Oh, yeah, difference. But in fairness, the answer for the readiness probe one was shit. The AI said, readiness probes check if the container is ready, and liveness probes check if it's still healthy.
That's why I said David should test you, because I was like, before that, while you were gone, we had it come up with the release names, and it completely made up release names. Like they were not the real ones.
That's some great hallucination right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm having to provide my own answers, but that's okay. The questions are what we wanted. Okay, which Kubernetes API object is used to expose a service to external traffic using layer 4 TCP or UDP?
Kubernetes resource exposing layer 4.
Yes.
This isn't like a service type like node port. This is a specific object or a specific resource.
It's looking for, yes, a node port would be, it's looking for a service type for doing layer 4.
Okay. Like a node port would expose that, but or is it looking for a specific type? Like, and you said it was external, so it's not cluster AP. Load balancer could be the thing if your load balancer supports layer 4 and layer 7.
Yeah, you've already nailed it and given more.
Okay.
a better
I'm trying to think. I feel like I'm missing something here, because this isn't like mainly you're ruling out ingress or gateway API. Gateway API can do it too, though. Gateway API does,
yeah, but I don't think the AI is up to date enough to have gateway.
No, it always gives me like the oldest version of whatever I'm asking for, and then I have to update it.
Yeah, this is like 3-year-old Kubernetes content, which is like 9 releases. So
So you're right. Ingress can't do layer 4. It can only do HTTP. So that's ruled out. It then has service as an option, but those are obviously internal to the cluster unless, in fact, you can't even, I mean, I'm assuming it means it's service, like what, you're just a plain service, which means you're a type cluster IP, which is internal.
Not external, yeah.
Node port could do it for sure if your service is listening, if your pods are listening, and then why would it not? But you're right, load balancer, whether you get a cloud load balancer at the other side or something provisioned internally in a cluster, is the only way to do L4 publicly. So, yeah. Which Kubernetes API object allows you to define a set of rules for selectively enforcing constraints on pod creation and updates, such as requiring specific labels or preventing privileged containers? Now, I like this one because its answer's wrong because it's not up to date.
Now, is this a not a mutating webhook, the other webhook, a validating webhook? I'm guessing not. This is probably an admission webhook, right?
You could do this through admission control, but it's not what it's looking for. It's looking for something that's baked into the cluster.
Policies, whatever.
Pod security policies. Yeah.
Security policy. But PSPs are gone, right?
Yeah, but we have...
What's their replacement?
I mean, they're also called pod security policies, so they're not.
The new ones are called pod security policies? Which one? Whatever one got deprecated, I never remember what the new one is.
No, I think they both have the same name.
No, pod security standards. That's it, right?
Oh, pod security admission.
Admission. Yeah, so
that's the new one.
I'm surprised it's not all named after Greek stuff, because I swear Kubernetes naming, like...
So there is a standards, but it's admission. Okay, pod security admission, 125 and above. So that's, AI is looking at 124 docs for PSPs.
Oh, I've even that up to date.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Okay.
All right. I'm going to give you one of the questions that I do at quizzes for Kubernetes because it's a fun question and there's multiple answers, but there's only one right answer.
Okay.
Oh.
There are two types of admission control in Kubernetes. What are they?
Mutating and validating?
Wrong. So those are admission controllers, but actually the two types of admission control are static or dynamic admission controllers. And then validating and mutating are types of dynamic admission control.
Okay, I see. Yeah, because like a static one is like you add as a flag to the API server when you start the cluster, and that's your set of what your admission, how you're letting things, workloads, any resources come into the cluster. And dynamic is, here's the webhook, go get the thing, and you figure it out.
Exactly, which can be validating or mutating. But I love doing that one because I usually spin up a kubeadmin cluster and disable the pod controller and then let people have some fun for half an hour.
Because you're mean.
Because you can disable individual controllers on the controller manager, whether that be replica sets, pods, deployments, stateful sets, whatever. You could just go in and turn them off, which I find there's lots of fun to be had there. Anyway, thank you for joining the Rawkode Academy Kubernetes quiz.
Thank you for quizzing him, because sometimes when I quiz him, I'm just like, oh, all I've got is Google and Wikipedia, because I don't do Kubernetes in production. But yeah.
We need someone to quiz you on some database stuff for Java.
We'll get Pete to do it when he comes on.
When he comes back. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you again, David, for coming on the show and sticking around for the outro as well. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And for everyone that has been giving feedback, we see the feedback, the comments. Hopefully, we're adjusting the podcast in ways that people like. And thank you for sharing it, because I noticed it in other places like Reddit and various places.
Reddit's been so cool to see all the feedback.
It's been fun. It's just great seeing that other people like the show. And I'm not just out there like, hey, you should come listen to my podcast.
And it was nice meeting you, David. Hearing about all the stuff you're working on is really cool.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here. Lovely to meet you both. Justin, I'll see you in London very, very soon.
Yes. I don't know when this podcast is going out, if it's going out before, but yes, for SRE Day and Talos Con that I'm doing for work, David is speaking at Talos Con. Are you also speaking at SRE Day? I
am. I'm doing a live clustered.
Yes, it's going to be super fun. So I'm looking forward to that. So if you're in London and want to come, hopefully you're listening to this before September 18th, 2024. Maybe we'll see you there.
I need you both to go to GitHub Universe so I don't have to go by myself.
I think that overlaps. Well, no, that's in October.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, check out GitHub Universe. Autumn is speaking in October as well in San Francisco. So San Jose, somewhere near
San Francisco.
Yeah. So, all right, cool. Thank you so much, everyone. And we will talk to you again soon.
3, 2, 1. Thanks for listening to Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash. Subscribe now if you haven't already. Head to shipit.show for all the ways, or just search for Ship It wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find us. Thanks once again to our partners at fly.io, to the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder for these dope beats, and to Sentry. Use code CHANGELOG when you sign up and save $100 off their team plan. That's all for now, but come back next week when we continue discussing everything that happens after Git Push.